Okay, I am tanned, shaved, relaxed, and rested, and I'm here in Alabama at the Moundville archaeological complex.
Moundville is a Mississippian culture site. I'm not going to go into much detail explaining the Mississippians here because I've done it more than enough in other episodes. So all I'll say is the Mississippians are a later culture in the mound building timeline, and that their mound sites were settlements and cities and not oft-visited ceremonial centers used by the earlier nomadic mound building cultures.
And I'm really excited, first and foremost, because I'm not wielding the camera with a selfie stick anymore. I have a camera person with me. But yes, we're here in Moundville, Alabama. This is a wonderfully preserved site. This massive city was the center of power for all of the South. This ruled over areas that are now called Kentucky, Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee and Louisiana from about 1100 AD to about 1400 AD.
Moundville was the seat of power in what we call the Southeastern Ceremonial Complex, a group of Mississippian cultures and other cultures occupying the region of what we now know as Florida, up to Wisconsin and Minnesota in the north, all the way to Louisiana and East Texas in the west, and Georgia and the Carolinas in the northeast. Their apogee was during the years 1200 AD to 1600 AD. They maintained massive trade routes that spanned the continent and held power and influence over the southeast.
It was as big as contemporary London overseas. And think about that for a second, because when I say medieval London, when I say London in the year 1200, I'm sure for you that evokes all sorts of imagery. All sorts of things come to mind. It tickles and teases your imagination. But I talk about a city on American soil around that same time, and you know nothing about it. You have no imagery in your minds. No stories are recalled. That's because you have no knowledge of the history happening here on the land you occupy. Yet you know so much about the history about a bunch of white people who are long dead, who lived thousands upon thousands of miles away. And what does that really say about our connection to history and our connection to ourselves? I mean, if you don't understand the history of the very land you're standing on, well, what do you understand about the history of yourself? How do you relate to your own history? How do you relate to your friends, to your family? Is there any reality to any of your relationships? To any of the bonds that you have with anyone else? Is there any merit to it? Or are you living in illusion? Is that misery that you're blaming on everyone else around you actually misery that you're perpetuating for yourself? You fucking monsters.
Moundville dominated the region from around 1150 AD to 1450 AD, holding sway over a population of nearly 10,000 people.
Behind me is one of the tallest mounds of the complex. And now, make no mistake of this. Even though these are structures of dirt, ash, and clay with flat tops, these are pyramids. These are contemporary to pyramids happening that were being built south of here by the Aztec, the Maya, the Toltec, Zapotec, Mixtec, and so on. These are platform mounds. These are flat top mounds. And the reason for that is because structures were built on top of them. Lodges, homes, ceremonial centers. This is where the chiefs lived, the spiritual leaders lived, or where ceremonies were performed on top of. And what's really cool about this site is a lot of these mounds still have the ramps intact that they used to ascend these mounds for ceremony or to go to bed at night. And what's really also really interesting about this city of Moundville is that this city is built upon what's called a sociogram. This city is equatable to your bullshit social media, ladies and gentlemen. This area was laid out according to social relations of clans, of their level of importance within the community, and of their relationship to other clans within the community.
A sociogram is an architectural depiction of social order based on ranked clans. Moundville was segmented into a variety of clan precincts, and those precincts were arranged in ranks. Those ranks were represented in the size of the mounds in their precincts and also by their distance from the central plaza. So our modern social media kind of relates to this, but more in visibility and size of followers. In the case of Moundville, the larger precincts were more popular and had more influence on social trends, on culture, on city rules and laws, while the smaller and lower ranked precincts had less sway and influence over the whole. This is just like our modern day society, where more popular and more visible influencers show us how cool it is to live in a van or be a nomad or go to a music festival or to be beautiful all the time, to wear heavily manipulated costume of makeup and dress filtered through AI algorithms, all to cover up and disguise these consumerist, soulless pieces of shit whose lives are dedicated to nothing but the consumption of goods and the manipulation of social status as a substitute for real love or real emotion, while the rest of us plebes only know any of those Instagram-filtered experiences to be difficult, tumultuous, and a struggle of which we have very little control over and very low odds of surviving or graduating out of.
We're standing in the downtown of a city that had a population of more than 10,000 people. This is the city center. This is where the nobles lived. This is where trading happened. This is where ceremony happened. But all in the surrounding outlying areas were the homes of 10,000 people in a relatively peaceful community full of artisans, merchants, hunters, nobles, priests, and more. Interesting of note about this community is that their burials, not noble burials, which were more often in mounds, a typical burial of a deceased relative happened in your home. Imagine that. Your little one-bedroom studio apartment in Manhattan that you incessantly type away on your laptop all day long and your blog that no one's going to read. All the while, underneath you, buried directly under your feet, is the body of your grandmother, rotting away and looking up at you in shame.
Excavations have uncovered some of the finest luxury goods of copper, mica, galena, and shells, which were all imported into the area. It's where the fascinating stone palette of hand and eye surrounded by two horned snakes was unearthed. The very image that I have tattooed on my forearm, which my girlfriend at the time got for me as a birthday present. I am still sifting through the trauma received and the trauma I doled out during this very tumultuous and unforgettable period of my life. But all in all, this time and period represents, well, not my time and period, their time and period, represents great sophistication in society, art, culture, and science coming from a people far more, quote-unquote, organized than the nomadic cultures who came before them. Namely, that in the southern continent, there was a people spanning the area with a similar aesthetic, such as building platform mounds and iconography of birdman deities, cross and circles, hands and eyes, and swastikas, and of having maze-based agriculture and organizing into complex cities. They were a warlike people whose cities and settlements probably were regional kingdoms competing with others, as well as other nomadic peoples of the time, for dominance and for resources in a very wild and untamed landscape.
And it's just my stupid luck that this site is so well preserved and so much of its art and artifacts remain, because the original landowner who owned this property back in the 1800s understood its significance and charged money to anyone who wanted to access it, be it a recreational person just wanting to view the mounds or an archaeologist wanting to dig. And no one wanted to pay any money for access to this place, so it remained untouched until the 1920s, when the land was turned over to the state of Alabama and excavations began. And because of that long period of not being touched, of being devoid of human interference and not many looters having access to the area, this is a literal treasure trove of Mississippian culture art. Eventually, the Mississippians mysteriously disappeared, leaving next to no trace. And by the time assholes like DeSoto and Cortez came here, they were nothing more but legend to the Native Americans who they encountered at that time, and then slaughtered, and then erased the history of, which is why we know next to nothing of these peoples. Okay, well, as I said, we're in Alabama. We've crossed into the south, and there's a certain line. I don't know exactly where that line is, but there's this ghostly line that traces its way through the states. And when you've truly crossed it, when you've truly entered the south, when all gas stations, all convenience stores sell these little magical beans. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking about boiled peanuts. This stuff is what I don't want to call it. It's not liquid gold. I think it's been boiled in liquid gold, or maybe it's been boiled in some cotton farmer's pee, because these things taste like electricity. We're here. We've arrived
Alabama?